Welcome to this week's episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm. This week, we sit down with Southern Illinois defensive coordinator Antonio James. In this conversation, Coach James discusses getting his start at the high school level, navigating job changes, and learning from every experience that he has. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach James. Coach James, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Man, I'm doing good, man. Excited to meet you. I know you were part of the 30 under 30 program prior to it kind of expanding to that 35 under 35 group, and a little bit before I took over the education. So I've always heard great things about you, and it's finally nice to, although I've seen the face plenty of times, to actually just see the face moving, not just an image, man. So good to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
Yes, sir.
That was a great club to be a part of, that 30 under 30 or 35 under 35. Now a lot of good education in there.
Yeah, man. It was a special group, and love seeing everybody kind of get back together every year. But let's go ahead and dive into the podcast here, and I'll circle back on your 30 under 30 experience at towards the end. The first question I always kind of get the podcast started off with is, when did you decide you wanted to be a part of this great profession?
Man, to be honest, I was probably 5 years old. And I know that takes it back really, really far. But I'm from a small town in Ohio called Massillon. Big time football. When you're born there, they put a football in your crib. My first experience on the flag football field when I was 5, I knew I wanted to be a football coach right then and there. I knew that I was going to be a part of this thing until I leave Earth, hopefully, if I'm blessed that way. But that was kind of the point I knew. And even to this day, when you go to my grandparents' home, I got notebooks full of football plays from elementary school, and they're illegal and not any good. But the idea was always there. The thought process was always there for me to be a coach. And even as a player, I did a lot of coaching as a player, talking to other players about what they're doing technique wise, asking coaches questions about schemes and why we're doing certain plays, what are we looking to accomplish. So I've been wanting this and desiring this pretty much my whole life almost.
Yeah. That's funny, man. I always get to ask a question, not that anybody cares about, when I knew I wanted to be a ball coach, but I did the same thing, man. I was more in middle school, and that's when I just was in there just getting 11 players on the field. Now I had too many on the line, all that kind of stuff, and I go to my coach, Tony Roth, and I show him a play, and he'd be like, yeah, but you're going to get some flags. But I want you to figure out why. And it was fun, man. It was such a I didn't know I wanted to coach then, but I know I was so intrigued with how you line guys up, how many people could be on the field, how many people, receiver covering up guys, all that kind of stuff. So that's cool, man. So it goes way, way back. Well, you get the opportunity to go play collegiate football. You were a 4-year Letterman, Rose Bowl appearance in 2008 at Illinois. Played defensive line.
Yep, defensive end. Played a little bit of everything there. Yeah. Because of the New York Giants, remember they won that Super Bowl, and they was putting Justin Tuckett in or D tackle. And kind of when I seen that, I went to our D-line coach like, hey, let me play some D-tackle too. Yeah. And, I started doing some of that. So I ended up playing some nose guard at, 260 and defensive end and everything. So
I got you. Well, I'm looking at the image. You look like you could backpedal and maybe cover post every now and again too. So I was like, make sure my notes are right here with the D-line. So, yeah, you played defensive line there in college, had a great experience. And, upon finishing, it's always an interesting time for athletes, right? You're trying to, especially when you're able to go play in the Big Ten for multiple years and letter and start and all those kind of things. And then there's a little window of opportunity for everybody to go play at the next level. And I'm sure you explored that. What was next after you kind of explored that option and that window closed?
Well, the big thing was, one, it was my first time ever not being around the game of football. It was about okay, now figure out You've been playing organized football for, 18 years at this point.
Yeah.
What are you going to do next? And I knew I wanted to coach football. Didn't know how I was going to, get into the ranks of coaching and stuff. So I went back to my college town because I didn't want to go back home. It was big for me to know if I went back home to Ohio, I probably wouldn't be where I am right now. And that was my personal journey. That's not everybody's journey. But I knew I would get put into, the workforce and probably not make it to the ranks of coaching that I wanted to. So I chose to go back to Urbana, Illinois, where the University of Illinois is, and work at the Pavilion Foundation, which is a behavioral health hospital, where I work with young men under the age of 18, mostly 12 to 18-year-olds who have some type of behavioral mental health disorder, and to help them work back into society successfully. I did that for a couple years, but I only did it for 1 year before I was approached by a member of the community named Nate Watson. And he approached me and gave me the opportunity to coach at Urbana High School, which is how I got into the business.
Yeah. So we're going to go back to this job that you had outside. You start talking about, just dealing with a group of people that, struggle a little bit maybe with processing, certain situations and things like that, and trying to mentor these young men, and then you start thinking about some of maybe the parallels of the profession. I know it's not a ton of layover in terms of criminals and then are people that could potentially be in jail, but the mentorship and helping these young men grow and decision make. There's definitely some synergy between that and the profession. So I love to kind of fall back on when maybe some of that has popped up into your career. But I would love to talk about first, though, you run into a member of the community and all of a sudden you're a coach. Like, what was the process? How did you let him know? It's like, hey, I got this job, I'm doing well, but man, this is what I really want to be doing. And how did all the dots connect for you to communicate you wanted a position and for him to say, hey, I got one, come on, let's do it?
First, I think that everybody who was kind of around me throughout college knew that I wanted to coach football. Okay. From my coaches, my teammates definitely knew. Everybody kind of already had that pre-assumption about me. I think it was just one of those things that maybe trickled into the community. But I randomly met Coach Watson one day, and we got to talking. He had just taken over Urbana High School at that time as the head coach. And he just asked me, being an Illini former member of the bigger football program in that community, if I would be interested in coming around and being around the guys, and for him as a high school coach, it's kind of good to get somebody who, played the game recently at the college level, to be around some high school young men who are probably starting off for the first time in the game, in some places, and the influence that you can have on them, because we all know that, our parents might have been right 100 times over teaching us something, but that one, celebrity or somebody who was in our eyes is a little more, celebrity status. When they told us something, and it could be the exact same thing as our parents did, it kind of hit a little harder,
Yeah, that's right.
Or you took it a little more serious. So I think that's what Coach Watson was going for initially. But, I thank him every day, and he's still, I keep in touch with him still to this day.
Good. Well, now you have the opportunity to kind of work, I say, in the real world. I mean, obviously all this stuff is the real world, but you had the opportunity to kind of have a job outside the profession, outside of football, and then you come back and coach high school ball after having this 4-year career, been a starter, watching game tape, getting prepared, training your body. Basically, and I don't want to speak for you because I don't know you that well while you were at college, but I can only assume for you to be, a really good player, that you worked extremely hard and you prepared and you did all the things that, a collegiate football player has to do to excel. And then you go to high school, and although you can have some really good players, they don't quite understand exactly what it takes to be a good football player. What was it like making that adjustment when, like, your last 5 years of the game was, that's all it was, you know what I'm saying? Back to when you were in high school, where it's like, hey, coach, I might miss practice. I got to go get a haircut, or, it's just not as important for those guys. What was that adaptation like?
Well, it was an eye-opening culture shock for me.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, but it was just something that my entire life you heard, but you don't really recognize. So the big thing was, and I'm speaking to anybody who's from a true legendary, like, high school program. Like, my high school is one of the premier high schools across the country. The state of Texas is full of those type of high schools. They're in Cali, those big time football powerhouse schools. So I was raised in one of those, and they would always tell us there's no place like Massillon, like and you would see other places, other stadiums we would go to, they would have fans there like, oh, come on, they just teach us that to make us very prideful about where we're from, But then I went into the real world and they weren't lying. Like my first team, and I'll start with the freshmen that I had 17 total players on the team. 3 players played any type of football at some point in their life. So the 14 other kids that I had on the team had never played football, maybe thrown it in the backyard once or twice. They played basketball and they played video games, but they never played football.
Right.
And then when we go to our varsity team that I was a part of, they had never experienced winning. So this high school I started off at, the only time they had the last winning record they had, I think was like in 1981 or 82 or something crazy. It was like a 20 plus year drought at this high school as far as winning was concerned. And, for me, the big thing is remembering, like you said, in college, we're lifting weights, we're conditioning. Like this is our job year round. The schedule's laid. When you get there, it was like, I got to go back to the basics of football. How do you get in the stand? Bear crawling, up, down, blocking a sled, just the very ABCs of football, teaching guys how to tackle and those things. And, to be honest, it was one of those things for me where I think it really helped me a lot because it made me remember that no matter what, the foundation is the strongest piece. I don't care how strong your playbook is, how many exotic one-handed catch drills you can teach somebody to do, or the pass rush drills that you got from online or created that can help, develop Aaron Donald into this pass rusher. If he can't get in his stance and explode out with the right footwork and stuff like that, all those other things are by the way, So for me, it was really good to get just back to the basics, teaching from the basics, and it really kind of rolled into my career as where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask that, how everybody's career paths can just be so totally different, and you could have skipped the high school part and immediately went to Michigan where you're coaching some of the best players in the country, and then kind of had the rest of your career, and maybe you skipped this part where you kind of get reminded that, man, you still got to get in a good stance, you still got to have a great first step, you still got to know proper hand placement from the ground root, and that's one of the things I admire about our high school coaches, across the country, because not only are they the most creative in schemes because they have to, they can't control who walks through the locker rooms at majority of schools in the country, but they also they have guys that are coming in here and saying, hey coach, what is this yellow thing? What do I do with it? Oh, you put it in your mouth. It's your mouthpiece, son. Yeah. Just all the fundamental stuff that you still have to go through. Did that really transform the coach that you are today? Just having that experience and saying, hey, you know what, man, day one, I don't care how many all conference selections you have. We're working stance and start. You know what I'm saying? That has that integrated into your coaching style?
Oh, 100%. To this day, my guys know that we're day one. We're working basics. Yeah. And to me, like if you have that strong foundation of the game, you're never too good. Like I always tell guys, we're never too good to get better at the basics of football. Like we're never too good to make sure the foundation of our home is stronger. And that's the base of everything. So we still to this day get like that. And our players, it gets to the point where you start getting the players coaching the new guys coming in and coaching the other players. And then I have a tier system that I work with guys. I kind of tell, you've been through the program with me a few years. You kind of had this mastered. I already see you can talk the language and stuff. Now I want to see you teach the freshman coming in the door. Yeah. I'm going to stand there with you, but I want to see you teach him how to do these things, how we're going to watch film and stuff, because I always feel like as a coach now, if I was a player, I could go back and be 10 times better because I'm seeing the game, speaking the game,
absolutely,
and things like that. So I really try to push for our guys to learn how to do that as well as players. Yeah. And then you're also developing coaches for the future. If any of them want to get into the business, they kind of already know how to talk with somebody. And back on that or high school thing, I would say the other thing it taught me was patience. The patience you have to have with young men who this isn't their life like it was in college. Like I got to go to the NFL. 90% of your high school team may not even see football after high school, and
Right.
To have the patience to know that this isn't their life and this isn't what they want to do with the rest of their life. They might be doing it because mom and dad are forcing them to, or peer pressure, or they think it's cool to be a part of something. So it's learning how to inspire those young men, having the patience to get to know them and find what they want to do in the world to help show how football connects with that too.
Absolutely, man. Now, I kind of talked about maybe the shock of just having to go back to the fundamentals. I also want to talk about just the initial shock of getting into the profession itself and then being a great defensive line coach. Obviously, you're a great player. Great players don't always make great coaches. What did you have to do to make sure that you were prepared to be a great defensive line coach? Like, did you walk in there and do the same drills you did at Illinois, which was not a bad thing? I don't want to phrase it like that, but or did you go kind of get out? Maybe now I don't want to say outside your comfort zone, but did you maybe kind of get out and say, hey, you know what? Let me look at how some other people are doing things so I can make sure these guys are equipped well. How did you sharpen your tools early on?
So I would say, early on, you do kind of go to the drills that you have been doing. You're 22, 23 years old. You're in the world. You're going to go to what's familiar, which isn't a bad thing. But I would always say that I had to recognize that those guys weren't all at the level of every drill that we did. Your get-offs, change of directions, those type of things they're ready for. Six shooters, teaching basic stuff. Those things they're ready for. But the higher end drills, where you're teaching swipes and some of those things, they're not ready for that just yet. So for me, it was about trying to figure out where my guys are, or where the guys are, and how can I best help them. So early on, I would say I went back to my original drills. But as I grew as a coach, it's always about, I'm not going to say finding a new thing, but it might be finding a way to say something better, or maybe a drill that teaches a base fundamental better. Those are the things that I kind of look for. And then sometimes I just have to create drills out of thin air, just thinking about who I'm dealing with, the personality type.
Right.
Maybe something I thought would have helped, somebody I played with. So it's been kind of a jump around as far as, how I progressed to that. And then even a step further, I never thought about being a great defensive line coach. I never thought about being anything very specific like that in the game. I wanted to be a great coach.
Right.
So as I said, I was working with the freshmen, I made every group do every position drill. So I had to do the DB. So we would all go do DB drills. I'd have my big guys, everybody doing the DB drills, linebacker drills, D-line drills, wide receiver drills. The big thing was because, like I said, 14 of these guys had never played football before.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that I was maximizing their skill set. Just because a guy's big don't mean that he can't be this over there. Just because the guy's small don't mean he can't be great there. Like my first year, my nose guard was the smallest kid on the team, probably 5'2", 5'2.5", above, 10 or so, but he was ruthless at nose guard. So who am I to not start him at nose guard,
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was an ever growing thing. And I wanted to make sure that I was setting my guys up for long-term success, not just quick picks on the game of football. So I really took the time to try to learn and think back on the different drills I've seen the other position groups doing while I was in college too, just basic stuff. And I reached out to a couple of my teammates and hey, what did you guys do? What's the initial for, running backs? What's the initial for tight ends? What are the basic things I need to know for these positions? And some of my former teammates were good on helping me out on just some of the base knowledge. So like I said, I took the time to try to be very generic with all of them, but get our guys a strong foundation of just the game.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, you spent a couple years there. I'm assuming you start working on a teaching certification. You mentioned Teach for America, so I'm assuming that's what you were getting done. But you get an interesting phone call. Talk to us a little bit about that transition that happened from 13 to 14.
Going to the University of Michigan.
Yes.
So yeah, I was doing Teach for America. I was down in Mississippi Delta at the time, finishing up my teaching certification and upper level math education. So I was getting it basically to be a math teacher for, high school.
Yeah.
And, it was a phenomenal, man, just call. But I got a call, the initial call, the first call I got was from a guy named Ed Warner. He was offensive line coach. He recruited me to the University of Illinois, but he was at Ohio State at the time. And he called me because they had a potential GA job opening up. And he wanted me to come up there and, get in front of Coach Meyer and some of these other guys to potentially become a coach there, a graduate assistant. And, I hung out, for a couple of days there and then came back down to the Delta. And then I get a call from Kurt Mallory asking me if I still wanted to get into the game of coaching. I said, of course. So Coach Mal, he's the Indiana State head coach now. We had a great conversation. And then he said, okay, well, we're going to bring you up here on an interview for a GA job. And he had brought me up. I went through the whole interview process up there. It was a very, very eye-opening thing, just to sit there, you're walking in, again, I was working in high school, out of playing ball, working in high school. Now I'm not coaching at all because the school I'm with, the Delta, doesn't have sports. And I walk into Michigan, which, is traditional, one of the powerhouses, college football, most wins and all this stuff. So you go in there, it's like Michigan. Wow. And you go through the interview process. And I remember Greg Madison sat me down and we're watching film and he's like, hey, I want you to talk me through, some technique stuff here. And, you're watching this, way better than any of the young men I've been working with for the last 2 years, obviously,
right.
Coaching high school ball in the central Illinois compared to, Big Ten elites at the University of Michigan. So at first I was, trying to be very respectful and generic and, hey, he looks like he's doing a good job here. Not really pointing out the negatives. And Coach Madison was like, well, I want you to go ahead and tell me what you really see. And then, so I sat there for a second. I was like, all right, well, he wants to hear what I really feel. And I was like, well, he has bad feet here. I don't like his elbows are out. He needs to turn his thumbs up so his elbows are in. He's attacking with his elbows out, so he's exposing his chest. His footwork is bad, so now he has to get into a crossover run phase instead of being able to man his gap and own the blocker. And that's whenever me and Maddie really hit it off. He opened me up to just being like honest about what it is.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily about being a yes man or appeasing them. They wanted to know, can I come in the door? Can I coach the defensive line? Not just be a guy who's working on a computer and drawing up cards for the scout team. But it was an eye-opening experience because it felt like, man, I had been away from the game too long. And I wasn't even away from the game, but a year and a half at that point. So,
yeah. Now, I think if you just listen, a listener just heard you say that part, I think it'd be pretty easy, to grab some takeaways. But if you had to give a piece of advice for somebody in a similar situation, there's tons of coaches that want to transition from high school to the collegiate level. And oftentimes it is going to be maybe a GA type role or entry level type role. You're not necessarily going to walk in there and be a coordinator or a head coach and be a decision maker. What kind of takeaways would you say, hey, coaches, look, you go in there and you go on an interview, this is what you should be thinking about, or this is how you should approach it. What advice would you give?
One, I would say be yourself. And I know everybody says that one, let loose who you are, because once you get in this office, you up here for, especially you get in the camp, you're up here 17-hour, 18-hour days sometimes. You're around these guys all year round, every day, pretty much of the year. Go ahead and be who you are, because at the end of the day, I think coaches are buying who you are more than they are anything else when you talk about the hiring process.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, don't be afraid to step on toes in your interview. Just because we do it this way here, I still want to see, how do you do it? I want to hear how you approach it and stuff, right. Because me as a coach, I still like learning. I still like hearing different philosophies that might hit a light for me, like, oh, that's why people teach this, and this over that, and that. So I'm going to say, don't be afraid to step on people's toes in your interview process. I ain't going to say step on your toes, but being outspoken about what you believe in as a coach and how you teach a position, because it's more of the progress of teaching. Do you have a good progression in your teaching than it is of like, hey, you like cover 2, we like cover 3. I don't think you're a good fit for us. Like that to me is like, we're trying to play into the hand that is given to us rather than playing the hand. So for me, I would say those are the two biggest things. and be prepared. You know what I mean? And I don't mean be prepared as in have all these manuals and all this stuff. I mean, be prepared as in have film, have evidence, have drills. How does your drill progress to game tape? Are we doing this drill and you actually get these scenarios in the game? Or is this drill kind of dead weight to the game of football and it's just something that's been passed along from the 60s, the 70s, to the 80s to now, and then people are just still doing the same drill and it doesn't like transition to the game at all.
Absolutely.
Those would be big advices for me, I would say.
Hey man. I go back and think about myself as a young coach. When I first started, I was a receivers coach, and we were in offense that was probably 65 to 70% run pass. And you know, as I finished my career up and I was a lot more sharper and all that kind of stuff, I reflect on my time as that receiver coach at this place where we ran the ball majority of the time. And every last drill we ever worked on was pass stuff. Like, I mean, like you said earlier, the one-handed catches behind the back, man, we could do it all, but we couldn't block nobody. You know what I'm saying? And it was just eye-opening as you get older in the profession and you're just like, man, you really gotta really think about what you're doing. You know, when you start talking about yourself being a coach, you got to really make sure that you have a solid plan and how you approach and attack everything. It should make sense. It should flow. You should have evidence. I mean, that's phenomenal advice, man. I appreciate that. Now, you had an interesting part, and hopefully this is correct on your timeline. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but you walk in with Brady Hoke as the head ball coach at Michigan. And in 2015, Harbaugh comes in, and you're able to kind of survive, you know, the transition. What goes on in a situation like that, especially as a support staff type guy?
So I would say the big thing is, so I got there at the beginning of summer of 14. So I didn't get to do spring ball or anything at Michigan. I had kind of got there right after spring ball. The summer transition began. So again, like I said, I'm still in awe that I'm at the University of Michigan right now. I'm learning how to work all these computers for the first time. What is inputting data? What is drawing a card? Like all these things. Like I'm learning how to work Visio and Thundercloud and all this stuff. Then on top of that, learning who the players are, watching them. So it was all kind of surreal at first, you know, for me. It was kind of like, you know, I'm still in the honeymoon phase. We get into the thick of the season and things aren't really going well for us. And the rumors start flying around about, you know, hot seat and all these things. When it finally happened, you know, I had no idea what I was in for. Because, you know, you don't think about as a guy getting into the business, like when the head coach leaves, everybody's getting let go. Yeah. You know, support staff is more likely getting let go. And you kind of already heard the rumors and stuff flying around. So when they finally did make the decision to let Brady go and they brought in Jim, the big thing for me was, and Coach Mallory was kind of one who pushed it to me, was like, keep your head down, don't say nothing, work hard. And so when he got there, you know, we started building recruiting boards up. Me and a couple guys who were still, you know, the support staff guys around the program, some GAs and stuff like that. So we started building recruiting boards, trying to put together the best group of players we could, trying to keep busy and showing that we're valuable and those things. So it ended up happening where as Coach Harbaugh came in, I stayed as a GA, then he kind of bounced me to a QC and then flipped me back into a GA role, all within that 1 year. So I was a GA in the spring, and in the summertime, I was shifted to a quality control guy. And he was going to try to brought in another offensive GA instead, but then they like changed the rule to where I could become another GA again for him. So I got to finish out as a GA there for the actual season portion itself. But it was a great experience because you got to see two different ways in approaching the game, to where Brady Hoke is a very personable guy. He's a very family oriented guy where it's like, hey, I want to see your family and kids up here. We're going to hang out outside the office. I'm going to have coaches over to the house. We're going to have a barbecue. We're going to have like kickball events and, you know, a lot of stuff where all of us were together. You know, a guy who's going to walk around the office and make sure he speaks to everybody in the room, compared to Jim Harbaugh, where he was a little more NFL professional, more like, hey, we're here to coach ball. This is what this is about. You know, make sure our guys are in line here for these things. We're not worried about, you know, the the coach binding experience as much immediately going into it. So it was a very different perspective of the game, but I appreciate both views that I got of it because I learned a lot, so.
Yeah, once again, I feel like I preface everything I've asked you here with everybody's coaching journey is just so different. And this is honestly one I don't think I'm 300 episodes into this thing, man, and I don't think I've really heard of somebody. So number one, surviving a staff change. I've heard of people surviving a staff change, but been a GA, been a QC, been back to a GA. Well, I just out of curiosity, especially as you're talking about Harbaugh having that more professional NFL kind of mannerism. What was the dialogue like? Was it like, hey, hey, Coach James, come down here. Coach Harbaugh wants to see you, and did you go sit in his office and he's like, hey, you're a QC now? What were those? Yeah. That's it. That was it, huh?
That was it. It was like, hey, he asked me to come in early in the morning. It was actually Coach Durkin asked me to come in early in the morning.
Yeah.
And he asked me to come see him at 6 a.m. And you're thinking like, first of all, I'm already in the building because I like to work out in the mornings before all this stuff. But you're thinking like, okay, defensive coordinator, important person wants to see you at 6 a.m. You either messed up pretty bad or you're probably let go or, something like that was going on in my head. And I came in and they kind of both sat down with me. It was like, hey, we like what you're doing. Unfortunately, we're looking to do this with the coaching staff right now. We think you would fit in this role a little better right now. And that was kind of the conversation. I didn't, again, still young. I haven't even been in the business 1 year as far as the collegiate level is concerned. It was just, yes, sir. I just remember what Coach Mallory said and Coach Madison just about just working. And it was just, yes, sir. And boom, kept going on doing what I did every day. So I didn't really change my approach or anything like that because they didn't say that I was doing a poor job, which is like, hey, I need to change what I'm doing. They just said they had to make some adjustments to fit the staff the way they needed it to go.
Right. Now, you talked a little bit about the interview process, and I think you hear this term not just in football, you hear it everywhere. But you're always interviewing. Everything you're doing is an interview. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've kind of heard people say that over the years, right? But it's like at that point in time, you interviewed to get that role, but legit from the time Harbaugh steps into that building, honestly, probably even before that, when it was probably a little dead time before Hoke is out and the new head ball coach is in. I mean, you're on a year-long interview, it almost seems like, where you're just, like you said, keeping your head low and just putting in work and just trying to impress, especially, because we didn't really dive into this part of it, is, you play college football. You've seen when you're sitting there and you're watching, the fourth quarter and it says, they're in trips left, gun, and, all that kind of stuff. And I remember when I was playing, I had no clue who put that in there. I just figured it popped up whenever we showed up. But, it's the guys behind the scenes. It was you behind the scenes knocking all that kind of stuff out. What was that like, and how did you impress in a role that you were really new to?
So in my first year under Coach Hoke, I only did I did a smaller portion of the data input after games or even preparing for games because we had a pretty big support staff that we had broke the roles up in. And then we had one main guy who, Coach Maddox, who was kind of the main guy for inputting the data for the games because he knew exactly how Coach Hoke and Coach Madison, those guys wanted to see it whenever they turned the film on. Yeah. So he was kind of like our final piece to putting those things in compared to when Coach Hoke transitioned out, Coach Harbaugh came in, it was more like, hey, you're responsible for these pieces over here. And when it came time for game day inputting the data, we took turns as the support staff underneath. We had to take turns for each game of who was going to input the data and who was going to be in charge of it that game. But it was important for all of us to speak the same language, same verbiage, so they always looked the same going in.
Yeah. Now, obviously an interesting time, hopefully a rewarding time at the University of Michigan. Like you said, I can only imagine being there for 3 years and, just the highs of walking in there into that blue and gold every day. Although I don't think they call it blue and gold. Is it maize and gold or maize and something like that?
Maize and blue.
Maize and blue. Yeah.
Maize and blue.
There you go. There you go. The maize and blue. And then two legendary coaches in the profession that you got the opportunity to work for early on. I don't know if you recognize that maybe in the moment, but definitely in hindsight,
No,
you definitely know you worked for
I do see it.
definitely two of the greats in the game. But then, still a young coach, man. I mean, I'm talking about in terms of just overall experiences. You've GA'd at the collegiate level a couple years. You coach high school football for a couple years. In 2017, you get the opportunity to be the co-DC, co-special teams coordinator. Now, I don't know if those roles maybe grew while you got there, but you get to take some really big roles at Morgan State. Once again, I asked the question, how did Morgan State come about? How'd you get connected, and why'd you take the job?
So, all right. This is always an interesting story because, I feel like this was a very defining moment, especially with Morgan State in my coaching career. And I always think that God put me on a certain path for a reason. So my wife was pregnant, going into that 2015 season, when we were at the University of Michigan, and, she gave birth in February to our daughter, who's our oldest, and, February 8th of that year. Right. And we had the baby in Chicago because that's where her family was. Now it's probably a 3.5, 4 hour drive from Ann Arbor to Chicago. It's not too bad, but I remember I drove to Chicago. She said that, she felt like it was time. I had drove to Chicago, and, I stayed with her through the process of seeing my daughter be born. Being there at the hospital is the most magical experience, as all fathers know. That's the moment life becomes real to you as a man. Like, wow. Anyway, I get on the road, come back to the University of Michigan, and I find out, the following morning that I will not have a position there, in 2 more weeks, that I was done. That I had to have my locker cleaned out, my desk cleared off, and they were giving me 2 weeks to do that, essentially. Part of the business, it is what it is. So I essentially went, jobless for a few months, just had my newborn. Things had been looking, we had a pretty good season that first year there. Things were kind of looking up, and you come home from seeing your daughter being born, and you're told that you don't have a job. So obviously you're hitting Scoop and everywhere. Where's the job open? Where's the job? What's happening? What's happening? And, for months, nothing. I couldn't get an email back, a call back, a text. I couldn't get coaches that I had worked for to call somebody for me to be like, hey, this is a great guy to bring on as a GA or anything. And I sat there, and then, Jeff Linsky, he was at the University of Illinois at the time, and Bill Cubitt had just took the head job over or whatever. It was kind of official. He was made the interim towards the end of the year. They kept him on. So they called and asked me if I'd be interested in coming back to my alma mater, me and my wife's alma mater, to GA there. And, it was kind of like, okay, it's a familiar place. I know the ins and outs of Champaign. I can move and maneuver there. Yes, would love to. So we pack up. We head down to Champaign. They offered me the job over the phone. I accepted it. We pack up, U-Haul it, moved on down. I get there on a Wednesday, real late on Wednesday night. Thursday, they're like, hey, we're going to, give you a call. We'll probably bring you in on Friday, get your paperwork done, all that stuff. So Thursday, I'm going around looking, apartment hunting, all that stuff. I kind of already know the sweet spots to hit. Well, Friday morning comes, and that was the morning where Bill Cubitt was let go, and they were hiring Lovey. So I had just moved my family. We just lost a job, been jobless, moved my family back to our college town, and the guy who was bringing me in was let go. And it was an awkward time because it was kind of going into spring breakish. It was in March, so it was one of those times where it was like, okay, I'm a little lost right now. So, I go up to the facility. I'm reaching out to everybody who I spoke to through the hiring process up to that point. And, they're all like, well, once he gets here, we'll, figure something out. And, Coach Lovie Smith had took over, and I think I got to meet with him maybe 2 weeks after that. So, I had spent 2 weeks in a hotel, essentially a motel. My wife had went back to Chicago, a couple hours away, because to me, it was bad business to be spending money and trying to take care of everybody. And we didn't really have it like that, being honest.
Yeah,
So, we're kind of sitting there and, trying to figure out what's the next move. And, they're like, every time I speak to somebody from the program, it's hey, well, next week they're going to call you and give you this. And then it went from a GA to a QC job. And, hey, we're going to, give you this job and pay you this much. And I kind of got strung along for about, through the whole duration of spring ball, of being told that I was going to be brought in and, given a position. And it got to the point where they just stopped responding to any messages, me showing up to the facility. It was kind of like I was being, bombarded, barriered away from all this. So we're sitting there again, and a good friend of mine had reached out and said, hey, man, a D-line job opened up at the HBCU rankings is Morgan State. So immediately I get on trying to find out who are the coaches there. Do I know any of the coaches there? Do they know anybody that I know? Well, my college D-line coaches, the two that I had there, were friends with the defensive coordinator at the time. And they had reached out on my behalf and just said that, hey, we don't know, coaching wise, but as character, you're going to like this guy. So I get on the phone with Ernest Jones. He gave me a call, and we kind of did an over the phone interview. And that was probably in May, at the beginning of May. And kind of similar to the Illinois situation, did a good job with them. And it was hey, we're going to bring you in next week, or we'll have an answer by next week. And it kind of took some time, but in the middle of June is when I finally got an answer where they extended the offer to me, the contract. And so me and my family packed up and we moved to Baltimore. So it was great experience. But, it was that time period from, the beginning of February to the middle of June where I didn't have a job. It was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of, telephone talk, a lot of trying to figure things out, a lot of quiet walks by myself, just going out and walking. I don't know if you know anything about Central Illinois. There's a lot of rural area, but just walking in some dead space and, reflecting on life and why, what is God trying to teach me here? What am I, what is this lesson here? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? How come I'm not a guy that's being called upon,
Right.
And I finally did get that opportunity to go to Morgan State, and it was a, phenomenal experience to step in the door there. And, it was a program who had gone under sanctions at that time, where we didn't get the full practice time. We had the 16 hours compared to the 20 hours. We had a scholarship reduction. So we had a lot of things working against us going into there. And those were things that the head coach and the defensive coordinator kind of prefaced me on to be like, hey, you're still okay, even though, X, Y, and Z is going on. You're good with that. And I was like, yes, sir. So that's how I ended up getting there. And then after the first season, I was kind of brought up by the defensive coordinator to have those extended roles, the co-coordinating on special teams and defense, to where he felt like, hey, you know enough of the game. You influence the guys strong enough and they listen to you that I would like to see you in one of these positions of decision making or power, essentially. And I had no idea, it was just kind of like, all right, well, I'll do it, So
Yeah.
second year in the coach and I'm coordinating. So it's one of those things where it was like, you don't turn it down, but it's like I knew that I was like, I don't know what I'm doing coordinating, you know what I mean? But I'm not gonna say no, but I know.
Now, I mean, that is a lot to unpack, man. That whole situation. And I don't want to say I've seen people in the same type of things, but obviously there's been guys that have been hired and a coach gets let go, and it does derail the process. I just I don't know if this is a better question to stick around and ask you after the podcast, but this is where you play ball at. This is where your heart was, blood, sweat, and tears out on that field. Have you been able to kind of maybe see the profession for what it was in that situation? That was like, hey, look, this was just a timing was just a messed up deal in this deal. Have you kind of let that go with that being your alum?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of learn the ins and outs of the profession just as it builds and continues to grow.
Yeah.
Or as I continue to grow in it. And, the big thing that I had to learn was that everybody has their own plan, and no matter how good or bad you are, or how loyal or where you're from or any of those things, like you can't inject yourself in anybody else's plan. You have to just live out yours.
Right.
Your plan has to be able to change and grow as you continue to develop as a coach. I don't, and people always ask me about this because you hear the situation of, like with me and Coach Harbaugh, where it was like hey, I just had my daughter. She's, 3 days old and I'm getting let go. And it's like, wow. But, me and Coach Harbaugh have grown very, very close. Because, our grind, our respect of the game is the same, if that makes sense. He respects like how I went out there and kind of paved my own way at this point. I ain't gonna say paved my own way, like people didn't help me, but like I don't come from a coaching family, and I don't have, a lot of guys on the line who are picking up the phone to call somebody for me and stuff. So, everything I've had to do through my own body of work. Even getting to where I am now, it had to be the body of work that I was doing on tape that people seen to be like, hey, who is that? And what are they doing? How do they get there? But that's just kind of the thing that I've learned, is that everybody has their own hiring process. Everybody has their own thought process. It's going to sound funny. It's not every school wants to win a championship. Not every school cares about winning a championship. Not every coach cares about winning a championship. We all say that, but as you see the layout and how things work, it doesn't mean we're all not going to do our best and do our best to try to influence and win and that type of stuff. But it's not at the forefront of everybody's mind. So I had to recognize that and be like, okay, I can't control any of this stuff. I just can only control the body of work I do and hope that it's good enough that the world respects it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where I got to when I first got to Morgan State. It was like, okay, it's not going to be a thing where people are going to be picking up the phone, calling me. It's not going to be an alumni thing where they're like, hey, you played here, you have a name here, we're going to take care of you. It's going to be hey, you get out there and make it so that people have to call you and have to hire you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the demeanor that I started taking on at that point was, since I can't get somebody to speak for me, I'm going to give my work to speak for me. Yeah. You know what I mean? And be the voice of what I do.
Right. And you're saying all that, and then you've just gotten promoted to a job that you basically kind of like, shoot, I'm not ready for this, but okay, I'll take it. And so now, how did you go get yourself in a position to go and not just take the job, but go and excel in it? Brag on you here. During some of that time while you were there, defense was number 1 in sacks, 29, number 1 in red zone defense, tied for number 1 in fourth down defense, number 2 in interceptions, number 2 in defensive passes efficiency, number 3 in rushing defense. Number 3 in third down defense, number 4 in scoring defense, and just in that little bit of time frame there, and I forget the conference. Is that the MEAC?
Yes, the MEAC.
MEAC.
To be honest, I don't know nothing about the numbers. Any of those things you name, I couldn't tell you how, why, any of that. I can say that the big thing for me was the relationships with the young men, and that's no matter where I go. It's not just with my position group. It's going to be with everybody I cross paths with. I'm not a big hype guy in the hallway where you're going to see me laughing and bouncing around with a lot of energy. I am me, how you hear me on this podcast, how you see me. I don't know if there's a true camera, but how you see me, that's how I am. But I take the time to learn people as individuals. And that kind of ties back to the mental health portion from my first job out of college.
Right.
Learning people as individuals and seeing that everybody is very, very different as a person, regardless of what background they come from, anything. You can have somebody come from a, $3 million household, both parents, single child, and they have just as much problems as a young man who comes from, they was raised by grandma, ain't never met dad, mom is on drugs, and they got more problems than them sometimes. So, it made me take the time to learn each one of those as an individual, and then playing to people's strengths. As a coach, and to this day, it still irks me at times when we talk about what somebody can't do. You know what I mean? Like, he can't do that. He can't do that. Like, let's coach him to do that as good as he can. And if it's something that is not a strong suit for him, let's not put him in those situations. Like, let's be smart about it. And those were kind of more things that I would say I coordinate to do. I don't necessarily sit up here and be like, oh, I got this phenomenal playbook and we have these answers for all this type of stuff when the offense lines up. Like, we don't. But I'm gonna tell you, like I tell our players, like I tell everybody, like, we're human. You're gonna make mistakes. Forget about it. Throw the idea of a perfect game out and play hard. No matter what you do, you're gonna play hard. And I think that motivational aspect is more so what's helped me as a coordinator than the X's and O's or being ready for the position, leadership wise. And not being funny or nothing, but I laughed because me and my wife spoke about this the other day. But throughout my life, I've always ended up in a leadership position. Never tried to, middle school, Pop Warner. We didn't play Pop Warner where I'm from, but the Pop Warner age level ball, middle school ball, high school ball, college ball, I always ended up, the leader of a class or the leader of a group or a captain of the team. And even in stuff that I wasn't like elite in, like I wasn't an elite basketball player. I didn't start on our basketball team, but somehow I'm the captain. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where I recognize that, and I just started seeing it was more of a thing where because I take time to get to know players, I'm vulnerable with my players. They know, I tell them, like, I'm not perfect. I made these mistakes in college and growing up. This is where I made errors that I'm very open about my mistakes I made, things that I've done wrong in my life. And I kind of let our players see that portion of me. And I think it helps them recognize, like, oh, he's a human too. Like, I just remember being in college, like, all the college coaches we had were perfect men. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't make any mistakes. They weren't never cursed. They never got an F in class. Like, that's how it seemed to us. That was a picture that was painted as a student athlete. Like, my coaches were unrealistic humans. So I try to walk in there and be a very realistic human with my players. Like, when they come in this room to meet with me, football might be the last thing we talk about. And that's the same thing it was when I walked in the door at Morgan. It was like, football might be the last thing we talk about in here. We're going to talk about you, life, motivation, family, like those type of things, lineage, legacy, your bloodline. Because to me, like, this game, like, yeah, this game isn't everything, but this game is very eye-opening to the rest of your life and the rest of society. Like, no matter where you go in this world, when you do certain things in this game, like, it's going to follow you. You know, how many NFL players are in real estate, but because their name rings a bell in a good way, like, somebody's more opted to recognize them or lean in towards them or ask them certain things. So I always try to give our players that realistic perspective. Like, man, you putting on for your name, you putting on for everybody in your hometown, like, everybody that you know, like, people you don't know, they gonna look at you and see you on film or on TV in the slow-mo action. When they slow that play down, did you make the tackle or did you miss the tackle? You know what I mean? So really taking the time to build that mind state with our guys to where they recognize, man, this is bigger than X's and O's. Like, because when you have that mentality in the game of football, it's easier to take that mentality in life. When I'm working a job, when I'm starting a business, when I'm interviewing for a job, man, I'm putting on for everybody in math. I'm putting on for everybody I grew up with. I'm putting on for everybody with the last name that's the same as mine, or, the bloodline that I came from, because all those people are looking and saying, hey, man, I know that guy.
Right.
And the people that don't know you that are in that area are going to start to know you. And then people who you have no idea when the world at large start to know you. And what do you want them to know you for? It's a good thing or bad. So, I really take a lot of time to dig in that way with our players. And I think that's what helped me the most at Morgan and Rising Fast, was the players just seeing me as somebody that they could look to and get a real honest feedback with. And I'm not going to belittle you about this. I'm going to help you recognize where you made the mistake at and how you can do better for it, instead of just going off about the mistake and belittling you about the mistake itself. Like, I'm going to coach you through it. Is this a bloodline thing, or is this a technique thing? Is this a schematic thing? And then try to fix that problem over yelling at somebody and hoping they figure it out on their own.
Yeah. It's just interesting sitting there, kind of going through this journey with you. I'm assuming how you're talking about each one of these situations is probably a little indicative of how you probably felt as you were going through it to a certain extent. And it's almost like that Morgan State stop was pretty special, because I don't want to say you found yourself, because, I mean, you were yourself at Michigan, you were yourself at Urbana, but, I mean, it sounds like you really found your place in this profession at that time. And where that situation kind of leading up into Morgan State could have ran you out of this thing, man. Could have just, you said, hey, you know what, man, if it's gonna be like this, I'm done. And you kind of turn a challenge into, almost into who you are. And I guess that's how life works. But man, it's awesome to see. Now I do like asking this question sometimes when it was as I'm going through this journey with coaches is you don't have a ton of stops like some guys have had 10 stops at this point in time in their career. You've been at 4 places at this point. Not counting where you are now. Which stop is it where it's like, man, that's the one that it was either special. I mean, obviously, they all are special. I know that, but which one is the one where you look and say, hey, man, this is where I really grew?
As far as growing career-wise, I would say the Morgan State stop probably molded me the hardest.
Okay.
And I say that because each level is a different challenge.
Right.
And the challenges were very, very different pertaining to the level. The University of Michigan, obviously, like you're Michigan, you better not lose a lot of games. The challenge was different, but you have the upper tier resources. You can get the upper tier players, like all that stuff. But Morgan, great athletes, but it taught me a lot because you had to learn how to work, one, with no facility. We did not have like set meeting rooms, nice locker rooms. Our weight room was the size of my office right here. Like we didn't have anything, our administration tried hard to do things for us. But at the end of the day, they're going to tell you they don't want to be known for sports. They want to be known for academics, so sports is never going to be something on the forefront. We didn't have an AD when I got there. We ended up getting an AD, I think 4 or 5 months into me being there. I had 3 different head coaches that I worked for, /4, on my way out in that tenure that I was there. So I had to keep learning new systems and new ways and approaches because each coach that came in was kind of like, hey, let's revamp this roster. Let's get rid of these guys here. Let's bring in a whole bunch of guys that I like or the guys that I feel fit us more, even though you guys had, 7 freshmen, true freshmen starting last year. Let's get rid of those guys and bring in new guys. And, those type of things where we're flipping rosters over and having to learn how to deal with that. Being able to keep my mouth shut at times when, morally you don't feel the same way about the situation. But being able to look at the situation and say, okay, well, this is a challenge that God put me with. How can I try to maximize these group of young men now? Or how can I maximize taking these people here who don't necessarily fit my idea of football and fit somebody else's idea? How do I mold them into successful players for us and mold them into becoming guys who can be valuable in life? And then the other part is, my dad always talks about this is, I got to practice in the dark. You know what I mean? I got to go somewhere where there wasn't a lot of national recognition. Now, last year I was there, you got more recognition because, Deion is out, bringing in a lot of publicity to the HBCUs at that point. But there wasn't recognition. There wasn't a lot of eyes on you. You weren't getting TV games. Like all that stuff was happening. So I got a chance to perfect, or I ain't gonna say perfect, but really work my craft in the dark, to where I wasn't going to be scrutinized for making bad calls. I wasn't going to be, put on a national spotlight for messing up in a certain situation, or even when you did good in a situation. Like we had our the first time they held a Division I team to nothing, the first goose egg in like 15 years or something when I got there. And it was one of those things where, again, you don't get the national recognition for it, but you get to learn how to handle the celebrityism you get from the university from that, and then continue building onto it. So I would say that was probably the stop that taught me the most. I bounced around in position a little bit, and then even my last year there, I was a walk-around coordinator. I had never done that as a young coach. I hated it because I like to coach. I like running drills and stuff. And as a walk-around coordinator, you feel like you have to step on other coaches' feet to run a drill. You know what I mean? And those were the things that were like challenges. But I was like, shoot, I want to be a head coach, so I got to learn how to do this anyway. You know what I mean? What if I get called to a job like in the NFL or some of these places where you are a walk-around coordinator, you're not coaching? So it taught me how to interject myself into drills without stepping on the feet of the coaches who are coaching the drill, how I can still get in there and coach guys, getting in little drills where I can now have an influence and not just be a guy walking around with a whistle. So those were kind of like my big things that I learned from Morgan. And, I'll forever be grateful to Morgan State for those, So.
Absolutely, man. Well, you definitely squeezed all the lemon juice out of that lemon there. I mean, it sounded like you learned a ton, and had a lot of opportunities to learn a ton. Now, we're running a little short on time, but I do want to just talk briefly about your current job. In 22, you get the opportunity to transition over to Southern Illinois as the D-line coach, quickly move to defensive coordinator there as well. As long as the assistant head coach, what would you, as you kind of tell all these stories and you put yourself into the shoes that you are in now, I guess kind of for a final question here, what would you say about your journey and how it's prepared you to be in the seat that you're in right now?
I would say that, everything is a lesson. Everything has something to take from it. Nothing's by accident, and don't ever look at your journey and somebody else's journey and be like, well, why does this happen for those people and not for me? Or, how come I'm because you're living a blessing that somebody else is, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and everybody's journey is a little different to how they're going to get to the end goal. And when I look at what my end goal is, I'm on track, I'm not going to sit up here and say it's been the perfect track for me. I'd love to have the $1 million coordinator job or, the $500,000 position job, all those things. You don't get that immediately all the time. But at the same time, like the impact I get to have on my guys and I get to be in a place now where I'm not going to say peace of mind, but I do have a peace of mind with, working for Coach Hill. He's a phenomenal person, phenomenal man. He really does a good job at caring about us as coaches and our mental health outside of the game. So, I'm very thankful for that. And, for that, I would say that people have to always recognize who you're working for and what the goal is that you're working for. Just because they give you a logo and say, hey, this is a job we're offering you, well, make sure that you're a fit for that head coach. Make sure you're a fit for that program because I have 2 little kids. It's important for me to be a father to my kids. I don't want to sit up here and tell recruits and our players, like, you're going to see me be a husband and father, but I'm never at home with my kids. You never see my kids or my wife around the office. But my players see my kids up here all the time. At least once a week, they're around here running around. They know my kids on a first name basis. My kids know their names, and that peace of mind, I would always say is huge, So what's important to you? To me, I don't think that I have to be at the office at 11 o'clock every night of the year to be a great coach. Like, I'm just going to be honest about it. Like, there are times of the year where I don't think I should have to come to the office. There are times of the year I think I can leave at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. There are times where I'm going to have to be here until midnight. You know what I mean? That's the nature of the beast. And, you have to know who you're working for, their expectations, and, how you feel about that. How do you fit into that more so than being excited to say, hey, man, I got this great logo on all of my gear now and we got this great salary, but then you mentally stressed, you mentally killing yourself, you're not having a success in life, or maybe your marriage is going through it now. Like, go somewhere where your values and your personal life are in alignment with what you're doing. Don't always chase the logo or the dollar sign. Like, I've turned down bigger dollar signs since I've been here. And it's one of those things where it's not necessarily that I didn't think those are great programs or good fits, but I don't think it would be the same for my family and my life, outside of the game and being that father. Like I said, I want my son to know me as a man and I can go to I got to go to his flag practices and his flag games this year. I get to go see my daughter's tennis practices and stuff. I get to go see their, musical recitals and stuff, to where I remember in the game, like, a lot of our coaches didn't get to see those things. They had to call from the wife to hear what it was. Right. How was the score and stuff. Like, no, I get to go and experience that. Like, there's nothing in the world that I could trade in for that value, because my son can never look back and be like, you wasn't at my game, he's 6, but he's like, man, you are at every game, so, it means something to them, And I think that's a bigger impact than anything, this game of football could do, is making sure your own lineage is being brought up the right way. And like I said, that comes back to making sure your goals and values are aligned with who you're following as a leader, and then the program that you go to.
Amen, Coach. I mean, that's a powerful message there, because this profession can burn you out, and it can pull you in some directions maybe you don't really want to go into. But I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us, man. This was a fast hour, man. It went by quick. I looked down and shoot, we're running out of time there. But before I let you go, though, Coach James, if you wouldn't mind just dropping your social media account, Twitter, whatever that you kind of, put most of your content out. So if guys got questions or want to keep up with you and your journey even more, they can do so.
Okay, I'm on Twitter or X, if that's what it's called. But my handle is at the number 2_ AD James. Make my initials and last name. But that's my account that I do everything through. Any type of reposting or getting to me, I do on that. Most coaches that follow me, I follow you back as soon as I see you're on there, regardless of the level of stuff. Even like there's like little league coaches who follow me and I want to talk to, because I might help them with something, but they might help me with something, or I'm always trying to learn and grow in this profession as well. So that's my main account that I use. I don't have an IG or anything. So, and then obviously a LinkedIn would be my other one. It's just my name is Antonio James. But
okay. Cool. Well, we'll make sure to link that in the show notes, man. Make it easy for everybody to find you. We appreciate the time. Thanks so much for pouring into our great profession, and best of luck to you, brother.
Thank you, and I appreciate you guys having me. It's been a great experience.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Have a good one, all right?
You too. All right.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.